is happening is that those tight junctions between all of these cells, because we've got astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, we've got all these other glial cells, we've got the macrophage, we've got all of these other cells, these support cells, and we want to make sure all of these junctions are really tight so that we do have protection for these tissues. We also find that in the choroid plexus, the area that's going to help give rise to the cerebrospinal fluid, that's going to be protected also. So that one is a blood CSF barrier, and it's going to be tight junctions between those actual ependymal cells in the choroid plexus. We do know that this barrier system is permeable to water, which is good, definitely permeable to glucose, because glucose is the only nutrient that it can use. Also permeable is anything that dissolves in lipids. So anything that can dissolve into a lipid, for example, oxygen, CO2, alcohol, caffeine, nicotine, anesthetics, all these things that can have this effect on the brain are dissolvable in those lipids. And it's the reason that you get the effects from them. Okay, so with caffeine, it's actually kind of interesting how it works, all right? So we have these receptors that are supposed to be able to pick up the chemical that would make us sleepy. Caffeine interferes with that. And therefore, you don't get that sleepy feeling from the caffeine. Well, because we do, like you, okay, I gotta have my coffee in the morning, all right? And probably more than I should, okay? But yes, if I don't do that intake, like if let's say I started buying caffeine-free coffee, you are, because it is a drug, you actually have withdrawal. And that's what the headache is. The headache is withdrawal of that chemical.
So when you have to like slowly stop drinking?
Depending upon the amount you take in, you may only have a day or two of the headache and the foggy feeling, and actually it has other effects too, like it might affect the heartbeat, maybe upset the stomach, that sort of thing. So depending on what your intake was before you quit, okay, it might only take a couple of days. But, you know, the higher the intake, technically the more of that drug you've been actually taking in, and the longer it's going to take for the effects to go away.
So if you don't drink caffeine really, but you take caffeine pills,
same thing. You'll have the headaches and the withdrawals and everything that would be stopping them. Might be you take them today, but you don't take them again for 2 or 3 days. Chances are you're probably just getting the effects of like a couple cups of coffee. And it's not going to be something, because it is technically a drug, you will build up. So might have started out, well, just this one cup of coffee, then it's like, well, I'm still tired. Let me have a second cup. But yeah, it's really interesting how it works. It's interesting how all of it works on those little neurons, like lots of substances. It is a little bit permeable to some of our electrolytes and waste products, because if the brain, and one of the things that your body is going to monitor very closely is the pH. For example, the pH of the blood should be roughly 7.45. Okay? We know that the pH scale is acids and bases. All right? Roughly that midline, 7, is where we're going to find neutral. Blood is very close to it. 7.45, though, can be a lot. All right? But can things be bad if it drops to 7.3? Yes. Why? What type of scale does pH work on? Is it? Well, we've got acids and bases, but for those hydroxide ions, which make up bases, for the acids, hydroxide for the bases, the H pluses for the acids, their increase or decrease in numbers, is it a linear increase or decrease? Just generally doing this number? How does the pH scale work? Linear or logarithmic? Logarithmic. Which means any change that takes place is done by a factor of 10. So, if I have a 7.45, and that is sort of at neutral, but I drop down 7.3, that's a 10, for each time it drops, it's 10-fold of the ion. And this means the body has to buffer that. Okay? The brain will monitor its own pH. And we balance acids and bases, which think of negatives and positives. Okay? We balance that by doing what? Like if there's too many positives, what would we add to balance it? Would I add the negatives to minuses and vice versa? In our bodies, what creates those pluses and minuses? Electrolytes. In this list right here, what are my electrolytes? Sodium, potassium, chloride. This is why that blood-brain barrier system is somewhat permeable. Somewhat. Note my terminology. If it was completely permeable, pH be messed up all the time. Okay? It's going to have a control so that it maintains the pH.
So, when you said it gets down, it's going to get down to like 7.3 or whatever, would that be like your brain shutting down, or is that not involved?
Well, the brain is going to be monitoring itself. So the blood might drop in pH, but the brain, for as long as it can, is not going to allow that drop. So these little ions would be crossing faster to make sure that it gets balanced. In the body, we're going to be dependent on the conversion that can occur within the bloodstream using our red blood cells, using other products in the blood that can buffer the higher pH.
So what would the number be, like, if your body works right now?
Oh,
Like a lot lower?
yeah. Yeah, you'd have to get a lot lower. And a lot of things would begin happening. Like, some, yeah, you'll get sick, like certain, you might have certain ailments and this sort of thing. Things would begin to occur before the pH, before, hopefully they figure it out and figure out how to balance it. Medications, psychotropic drugs, okay? Medications that can affect these neurons, for example, antidepressants, okay? They have been made so that they can be dissolvable in this area. In other words, can make it across that lipid barrier. Otherwise, medication does not cross the blood-brain barrier. It's the reason that if someone gets a brain infection, ever known anybody that's had one? Terrible. It's horrible. I mean, my mom was in the hospital for over 7 months with her brain infection because antibiotics cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. It was like only this one medication that had just a slight chance of even being able to attack the bacteria that had wrapped around her brain stem, and it was horrible. So antibiotic medications, unless they are formulated to go through that lipid layer, they do not affect the brain cells, which are most antibiotics, which is kind of cool. Now, as we look at the part that's going to be coming with the brain. The brain, yes, part of my central nervous system. The brain, the spinal cord. Everything else is my peripheral, peripheral nervous system. It's contained in the cranial cavity, very well protected. It is the control center for almost all of the body's functions. It is much, and I don't like that. I do not like it when our brains are compared to a computer, because computers can only function linearly, meaning A, B, C, D, and before D can take place, A, B, and C had to have occurred. Okay? Our brains are much more complex, way more complex. And I don't know about all this AI stuff. Okay? I know it's taking over the world, but hey, I've done what's right. The brainstem, cerebellum, the diencephalon, the cerebrum, our brain stem. This is what connects the spinal cord to the brain. Very necessary for survival. Because yes, this is our instinct. This is our taking care of a lot of those homeostatic mechanisms. The cerebellum, a lot of our ability to move, to have balance, posture, a lot of that's occurring in the cerebellum. Well, that diencephalon, that's going to come under our endocrine system, which we'll talk about later. The cerebrum is our conscious thought. That is the area of higher order brain function. That's what it's going to be termed. The cranial nerves that are associated with the brain, they are a part of our peripheral nervous